Have you ever walked into a place where you belonged, only to be treated like you didn't imagine stepping into your own bank, the very institution you helped build, only to be told you didn't belong there, that your money wasn't real, that you should try the pawn shop next door? What would you do? Stay silent, swallow the humiliation, and walk away, or stand firm, reveal the truth, and change not just your story, but the system itself? This is the story of Zara Mitchell, a black CEO who faced public rejection in the marble lobby of her own bank. In a moment where most of us would freeze, she had a choice to accept the insult, or to speak the 5 words that silenced the room. I own this bank. As you listen, ask yourself, if it were me, would I have had the courage? Because this story isn't just about banking or business. It's about dignity, about power, about what happens when ordinary people say, enough, stay with us. Like, share, and subscribe so together we can dive into a story that may just change the way you see respect, leadership, and yourself. Friday afternoons always carried a certain weight at Heritage First Bank's downtown Atlanta branch. The marble floors gleamed as if the janitorial staff had polished them twice over, and the quiet tick of the oversized clock above the teller line reminded everyone that closing time was near. Customers were anxious to finish their business before the weekend. Tellers typed faster, guards glanced at the door more often, and managers hoped for no last-minute complications. But complications had a way of arriving in unexpected packages. At exactly 2:45 p.m., Zara Mitchell walked into the branch. She carried herself with the calm precision of someone who had sat in boardrooms for decades, yet she dressed in a way that drew little attention. A navy pantsuit, a cream blouse, and low heels. She was 45, black, and radiated a kind of quiet confidence that some people confused for arrogance. In her right hand, she held a simple withdrawal slip, $50. In her left, she gripped a leather briefcase that looked ordinary except for a small platinum insignia near the handle, something few people in the lobby would recognize. Zara approached the manager's desk rather than the teller line. She had been through this before. Large withdrawals often required managerial approval. What she hadn't expected was the expression of disdain that greeted her. Bradley Moore, branch manager for the past 18 months, didn't just take the slip from her hand. He flicked it back across the desk as if it were contaminated. The paper hit Zara's chest before drifting down to the floor between them. His lips curled into a smirk as he leaned back in his chair, folding his manicured fingers behind his head. "Listen, sweetheart," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "If you're looking to cash in something big, maybe try the pawn shop next door. They're a little more accommodating to people like you." The words landed in the marble lobby like shards of glass. A couple of waiting customers gasped audibly. One woman's phone appeared in her hand almost instinctively. The tension in the air thickened. Zara didn't flinch. She bent down, picked up the slip, and placed it neatly back on his desk. Her voice was calm, steady, almost too quiet for the moment. "Mr. Moore, I believe you're making a mistake." Brad gave a theatrical laugh and reached for the hand sanitizer pump on his desk. He pressed it 3 times, slowly, rubbing the gel into his palms with exaggerated care, as if handling her request had somehow dirtied him. "A mistake, ma'am. I've been doing this job long enough to spot suspicious transactions. 50 grand in cash. From someone I've never seen before? Let's be real. You don't exactly look like our typical clientele." The insult wasn't even subtle. It floated in the air like a toxic cloud. Zara's grip tightened on her briefcase, but her voice never wavered. "Have you ever been judged by your appearance, Mr. Moore?" Before anyone knew your story, Brad's eyebrows rose, amused. "Story? Sure. Everybody's got a story. But around here, we don't operate on fairy tales. We operate on policy. And policy says I need 3 forms of ID for this kind of request: driver's license, social security card, proof of residence dated within 30 days. Got all the phones began lifting across the lobby. Customers smelled drama, and drama in a bank lobby was never boring. Zara slid her Louisiana driver's license across the desk. Brad picked it up like a detective in a crime show, holding it to the light, tilting it back and forth, frowning at the hologram. Louisiana. Huh? How long you been in town? 5 years, Zara replied evenly. I've banked here for 3. Brad typed on his computer with deliberate slowness. Each keystroke was a performance, each pause a silent accusation. Then he leaned back again, crossing his arms. Computers showing some irregularities. Multiple large deposits from different sources. How'd you get these funds exactly? A murmur spread through the lobby. Customers exchanged glances. One young woman in the back whispered to her phone camera. Streaming live. Y'all, and this manager is profiling this sister right now. Straight up. The live counter on her screen ticked from 12 viewers to 48 in less than a minute. Zara breathed slowly, steady as stone. I run a private equity firm, she explained. These are standard transfers from investors. Brad chuckled. Private equity. What kind of business, exactly? Consulting, event planning. Hair products. Each suggestion came coated with syrupy contempt, the unspoken assumption clear a black woman could not possibly be running legitimate finance. Behind Zara, a Latino security guard, Officer Miguel Torres, shifted uncomfortably. He'd worked in law enforcement for 20 years and could smell trouble. This wasn't trouble. But Brad's gesture earlier had been unmistakable. Stand ready. Is there a problem here? Torres asked quietly. No problem. Zara answered before Brad could. Just a misunderstanding about customer service. Brad laughed loudly. Performing for the audience he thought he had. Customer service, ma'am. Our customers don't need to be educated about banking procedures. They already understand how legitimate business works. The word educated hung in the air, sharp as a slap. Several customers shifted in their seats. Even Officer Torres winced. Still, Zara remained unshaken. Her voice, quiet but firm, cut through the lobby. I came here to withdraw my own funds. That's all. Brad leaned forward, lowering his voice to a stage whisper that carried across the marble floor. You wouldn't believe the scams we see. Just last week, someone brought in a photoshopped lottery ticket. It looked real, too. The comparison drew gasps. Customers began recording openly now. The clock above the lobby read 2:51 p.m. 9 minutes until closing. And Zara Mitchell stood at the counter of a bank she knew better than anyone else in the room, denied the dignity of a simple transaction. The storm was only beginning. The air inside Heritage First Bank thickened like summer heat pressing down on the chest. Every movement, every breath seemed louder against the hush of marble and glass. The tick of the clock overhead sounded almost theatrical. 2:52 p.m. 8 minutes until closing, and the ordinary rhythm of a Friday afternoon had tilted into something raw and dangerous. Bradley Moore leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, wearing the smirk of a man who believed the entire room belonged to him. His voice carried, not just to Zara Mitchell, but to the small crowd now gathering like moths to the glow of conflict. Ma'am, we take fraud seriously here. Suspicious withdrawals need extra scrutiny. You should know that. His words carried the weight of accusation. Zara's steady eyes met his, unwavering. She had faced men like him before in boardrooms, on panels, across negotiation tables, but never had the stakes felt quite so personal, so visible. She said nothing yet. Silence, she knew, could be louder than protest. From behind the teller counters, a woman in her early 30s shifted nervously. Kendra Lewis, the junior teller with 3 years of experience, recognized Zara instantly. She had processed her deposits before. Kendra opened her mouth to intervene, but quickly shut it again under Brad's sharp glance. The branch manager had a reputation for humiliating staff who challenged him in public. Kendra's pulse raced, her conscience at war with her job security. A new voice entered the scene. "Is everything all right here?" It was Linda Harris, the assistant manager, heels clicking as she emerged from her office. Her polished demeanor suggested a woman used to diffusing tension, but her eyes darted immediately to Brad, searching for cues. He gave her the faintest nod, and she fell in step beside him, forming a united front. Linda's tone was diplomatic, but her body language said otherwise. Of course, we must protect our depositors' interests. $50,000 in cash is no small matter. The words sounded reasonable enough, but the undertone was clear to everyone listening. This woman standing at the counter didn't belong in that category of valued depositor. The phrase hung in the air, sharpening the lines between respect and suspicion. Zara placed her driver's license back in front of them. "This is my account, my funds. I've banked here for years." Brad chuckled, shaking his head. You'd be surprised how often people convince themselves of stories that aren't true. We see it every week. Maybe you got the wrong bank. Sweetheart. The insult drew murmurs. Customers shifted, some pretending not to notice, others watching with barely concealed outrage. A man in a tailored suit, waiting for his wire transfer, raised an eyebrow as though witnessing theater more compelling than anything he'd streamed at home. Near the back, Aisha Brown steadied her phone, live stream still rolling. Her whispered commentary traveled across the digital ether. Now there's 2 of them ganging up on her. Y'all seeing this? This is about to go viral. Her view count ticked past 300. Comments scrolled faster. Get their names. Sue the bank. This is blatant discrimination. Brad straightened his posture, sensing the attention, and amplified his performance. Security, he called, loud enough for the entire lobby. We may need to escort this woman out if she keeps insisting on this nonsense. Officer Miguel Torres froze mid-step. His instincts screamed this was wrong. 20 years in law enforcement had taught him to recognize real threats. Zara Mitchell wasn't one. She was standing calmly, hands visible, voice even, but Brad's command carried authority. Torres hesitated, then walked closer, his face conflicted. "Sir," Torres said carefully, "I don't see a disturbance here. She's being cooperative." Brad's eyes narrowed. "You'll see the disturbance soon enough if she keeps this charade up." Torres felt heat rise under his collar. He had dealt with criminals, addicts, people on the edge of collapse. This was different. This was theater built on prejudice. But he had bills to pay, a family to support. He remained silent, unwilling to openly defy his manager in front of a crowd. Zara glanced around the lobby. She could feel the weight of every gaze, some sympathetic, some skeptical, some indifferent. She could hear Mrs. Caldwell, An elderly white customer. Whisper loudly to her friend. This neighborhood has changed so much. Used to be respectable. The comment sliced the air like a knife, and Zara felt a pang deep in her chest, not of shame, but of recognition. It was the same sentiment she had grown up hearing, coded in different words, recycled through generations. Her heart beat slower than the clock. 2:54 p.m. 6 minutes until closing. Brad leaned forward, towering over his desk. Here's the bottom line. I'm going to need documentation for every deposit into this account over the past 6 months. Bank statements, tax returns, proof of income. You know, the real stuff, not just a driver's license. Zara tilted her head slightly, her face unreadable. For a withdrawal from my own account. Exactly, Brad replied, savoring the moment. That's called protecting the institution. You understand, don't you? Gas rippled through the lobby. The absurdity of the demand was obvious to everyone except the man giving it. Kendra's hands trembled at her station. She whispered to herself, This isn't right. This isn't right. She thought of her own mother, who had once been denied a car loan at this very bank despite perfect credit. The humiliation had taken weeks to fade from their family dinner table. And here it was again, replaying in real time. Aisha's live comments exploded. This is insane. They're asking for tax returns for a withdrawal. Call a lawyer. Tag the news. Her viewer count surged past 500. Linda placed a manicured hand on Brad's arm. Maybe we should call the police, just to be safe. This has all the signs of a fraud situation. These people often work in groups. The phrase "these people" hung in the room like smoke. Undeniable. Toxic. Even some of the customers who had remained neutral shifted uncomfortably now. The line between professional caution and outright discrimination had been crossed, and everyone knew it. Zara inhaled deeply, her composure intact. The briefcase by her side felt heavier, but also steadier, like an anchor. She had carried secrets in that case, plans, acquisitions, strategies, things most in this room could not begin to fathom. She thought of her mother again, turned away decades earlier by a loan officer who wore the same kind of smug smile Brad wore now. The memory lit a fire inside her, not of rage, but of resolve. She spoke softly, yet her words reached every corner of the lobby. Mr. Moore, I'm trying to complete my business, but you seem determined to stop me. Brad rose to his full height, 6 feet of inflated authority. He leaned over the desk, close enough for the disdain in his eyes to burn. Look, whoever you really are, this little act ends now. You can either walk out that door with dignity, or we can have security escort you. Your choice. The ultimatum hit the room like thunder. Customers craned their necks, phones angled higher. Aisha's voice trembled with excitement as she whispered into her mic yawl. This is it. She's not backing down. Watch. The clock read 2:55 p.m. 5 minutes until closing. Zara's eyebrow arched, the faintest crack in her calm expression. She glanced once at the door, then back at Brad. Her voice, cool and sharp, cut the silence. Mr. Moore, I haven't finished my business here. The lobby held its breath. The air was charged, the kind of silence before a storm breaks. And in that moment, the power balance began to shift, though Brad had no idea just how much. The marble lobby blurred for a moment as Zara lowered her gaze to the withdrawal slip. She heard the tick of the clock, the rustle of clothes, the faint hum of someone whispering into a phone camera. All of it folded into a haze that carried her somewhere else back to Baton Rouge, 30 years earlier. She was 15 again, sitting beside her mother in a cramped loan office that smelled of stale coffee and dust. Her mother wore her best dress, navy blue with tiny white buttons, and clutched a folder of pay stubs, tax forms, and proof of steady employment. The loan officer, a middle-aged white man with thinning hair, never once looked her mother in the eye. He tapped a pencil against the desk, sighed, and said words Zara could never forget. "People like you aren't a safe bet." Zara remembered the tremor in her mother's hands as she folded the papers back into the folder, the way her shoulders hunched as if carrying not just rejection, but shame. The silence that filled their small kitchen that night. It had taken her years to understand that the shame didn't belong to her mother at all. It belonged to the system that had branded her unworthy before even hearing her story. Now, decades later, Zara felt the same branding iron pressing against her skin, wielded by Bradley Moore in his tailored suit and smug grin. The echo of that moment, her mother's silent humiliation, vibrated through her. For a fleeting second, she considered the path of least resistance. She could simply walk away. She didn't need the $50,000 in cash that badly. Her company accounts overflowed with liquidity. Tomorrow, she could send a wire from headquarters, bypass this small-minded man entirely. Why endure this theater? Why subject herself to public scrutiny? But then she thought of Kendra, the teller shifting nervously behind the counter. She thought of the security guard Torres, caught between obedience and conscience. She thought of the young woman live-streaming from the back Aisha, whose generation would carry these stories into the digital bloodstream where millions could bear witness. If Zara walked away now, she knew the message it would send, that silence was safer than dignity, that retreat was easier than confrontation. She had built her career on the opposite belief that dignity was non-negotiable, that silence never changed anything. Her breath deepened. She felt the leather handle of her briefcase under her fingers, grounding her. Inside was more than paper. It was power. The kind earned through years of resilience, strategy, and sacrifice. Brad's voice pulled her back into the present. "Clock's ticking. Ma'am, you've got two choices. Walk out peacefully, or we'll handle this another way." His words layered over her memory of the loan officer. Both men different, yet the same script, the same presumption of superiority. She looked up, her eyes locking on Brad's with a steadiness that startled him. In her mind, the debate raged. Was this the right hill to fight on? Would the public humiliation of a branch manager accomplish anything, or would it brand her the angry black woman stereotype? Undermining everything she had worked for, her chest tightened at the thought. That label was a trap she had seen countless women fall into, punished not for their actions, but for daring to resist. Yet another voice rose inside her, firm and unyielding. If not now, then when? If not you, then who? She remembered the night her firm closed its first major acquisition, a $500 million deal that had nearly collapsed when partners underestimated her. She had smiled then, masking fury with grace, and quietly delivered results that silenced every doubter. That night, she promised herself that dignity would always guide her, no matter how bitter the fight. So now, standing in the lobby of Heritage First, with dozens of eyes on her and hundreds more watching through Aisha's phone, she chose resolve over retreat. She straightened her shoulders. Her breathing slowed, steady. Inside, the storm still churned, but on the surface she radiated calm. She reached for the slip, folded it neatly, and tucked it into her briefcase. "Mr. Moore," she said softly, "you have no idea who you're speaking to." The room quieted. the sentence landing like a tremor before an earthquake. Customers leaned forward, sensing a shift. Aisha's live stream comments exploded with speculation. Brad laughed again, but it lacked the earlier confidence. "Lady, I don't care if you're the governor of Georgia. In my branch, you follow my rules." Zara felt the old ache of injustice, but alongside it now came clarity. Her role wasn't just to claim her withdrawal. Her role was to mark a line in the sand, to embody what her mother had been denied the right to be seen, heard, and respected without condition. She closed her eyes briefly, whispering inwardly, "This isn't just about me. It's about every person who ever walked away because it was easier than fighting." When she opened them, her expression was serene, unmovable. She was no longer debating herself. The decision had crystallized. She would not leave quietly. The clock struck 2:56 per mem. 4 minutes until closing. Every tick now sounded like a countdown, not to the bank's end of day, but to the unraveling of Brad Moore's performance. Her voice carried low, but certain, each word deliberate. "I think you're about to learn something about customer service, Mr. Moore." The lobby held its breath again. The storm inside her had transformed into purpose, and everyone could feel the air shift. The lobby of Heritage First Bank no longer felt like a bank. It felt like an arena. The marble pillars and polished counters had become a stage, and every person inside was part of an audience that hadn't paid for tickets but couldn't look away. Zara Mitchell stood still, her briefcase resting against her leg, her gaze steady on Bradley Moore. She had spoken softly, but her words had carried farther than she imagined. They had struck something in the air, an unseen gong that reverberated through the lobby. From the back corner, Aisha Brown clutched her phone tighter. Her live stream had started as a casual boredom killer, but now it had become something else entirely. Her view count ticked past 100. Comments scrolled so quickly they blurred. "She's handling this like a queen. This manager is done." "Where is this tag CNN?" Aisha whispered to her camera, her voice trembling with adrenaline. "Y'all, this woman is calm like stone. I don't know who she is, but she's not backing down. And she turned the camera slightly toward Brad. He's sweating now." Brad, indeed, had begun to fidget. His earlier bravado flickered under the weight of so many eyes, both physical and digital, yet he pressed on, determined not to lose face. "Security!" He barked again, louder this time, though Officer Torres remained rooted where he was. Torres scanned the room, gauging the mood. He could feel it. The tide wasn't with Brad. It was with the woman who had spoken with such quiet conviction. Years of reading crowds told him that forcing her out now would ignite something dangerous. "Sir," Torres said slowly, choosing his words like stepping stones across a river, "I still don't see grounds to remove her. She's not causing a disturbance." Brad spun toward him, eyes flashing. "You're supposed to take my lead." Torres didn't flinch, and I'm supposed to keep the peace. Right now. She's not the problem. The exchange drew murmurs of approval. Someone clapped once, quickly stifled. Linda Harris, sensing her manager's grip slipping, interjected with a voice coated in professionalism. "Mr. Moore, perhaps we should take this conversation into the office." No need to Zara cut in, her tone even, polite but firm. "No, Ms. Harris, whatever you have to say, you can say it here, in front of everyone." The declaration landed like a gauntlet thrown. Customers shifted in their seats. A father holding his toddler whispered, "She's right. Let everyone hear it." In the back row, Mrs. Caldwell shook her head, muttering to her friend. Always making a scene, always wanting attention. But her friend, surprisingly, replied, "Maybe she deserves it this time. Look at the way they're treating her." The lobby divided itself without instruction, those who bristled with old prejudices, and those whose eyes opened wider with every passing second. Aisha's live stream soared past 2,000 viewers. Comments came in waves. "She's demanding transparency. This is how you fight back. Keep filming." Brad rubbed his temples as if pained by the noise around him. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, then raised his voice. "Ma'am, last warning. Step into the office, or step outside. Those are your options." Zara tilted her head, her calm gaze never faltering. "You believe you hold the power here, Mr. Moore, but power doesn't come from threats. It comes from truth." Her words stilled the lobby. Even Aisha lowered her phone for a moment, stunned by the weight of the sentence. Kendra, the teller, finally found her courage. She spoke softly at first, then louder when she realized people were listening. "Mr. Moore, I've seen her before. She's a client, a good one. Her accounts are solid." Brad's head snapped toward her, fury flashing in his eyes. "Stay in your lane, Kendra." But the damage was done. Customers had heard. They had a witness from inside the bank, and her voice carried weight. Zara looked at Kendra, her eyes warm with gratitude. Just a flicker, but it steadied Kendra's trembling hands. The clock read 2:57 PT Mom. 3 minutes until closing. Brad tried again, his voice cracking under the strain. "Folks, you need to understand banks deal with scams every day. If I let her walk out with 50 grand without proper vetting, this branch could be liable." A man in a gray suit, who had been silent until now, raised his voice. "I've withdrawn more than that from this branch. No one ever asked me for tax returns." The words hit like a hammer. Heads turned toward him. He shrugged, unapologetic. "Difference is, I don't look like her." Gasps filled the lobby. Even Mrs. Caldwell had no reply to that. Brad's face flushed crimson. "That's not what this is about," he shouted, but his denial rang hollow. Aisha's live stream counter surged past 5,000. She whispered into her mic, "It's happening. Y'all. Everyone sees it now. They can't spin this." Zara's heartbeat was steady. Inside, she still felt the echo of her mother's shame, but it was no longer hers to carry. She had replaced it with something else resolve sharpened by years of quiet battles. Her voice carried across the lobby, low but clear. "I came here for my withdrawal. Instead, you've put me on trial in front of strangers. Well then, let's have the trial right here." The customers erupted not in chaos, but in a collective energy, like a jury preparing to deliver its verdict. Phones angled higher. A child whispered, "She sounds like a teacher." Linda tugged at Brad's sleeve, panic rising in her chest. "Brad, maybe we should." But Brad shook her off. His pride was too far gone to retreat. He puffed his chest and leaned over the desk. "Lady, you're about to regret this." Zara didn't blink. "Mr. Moore, the only regret here is yours, because you've mistaken silence for weakness, and you're about to see the difference." The clock struck 2:58 p.m. 2 minutes until closing. The entire lobby seemed to lean forward at once, caught in the gravity of what was about to unfold. The second hand of the clock sliced the air toward 3 o'clock. 2 minutes remained before the branch would shut its doors. But the crowd inside Heritage First Bank knew no one was going anywhere. Bradley Moore's jaw clenched as if he were preparing for a fight. His authority had already begun to crack under the weight of witnesses. Yet he clung to it, like a drowning man, to driftwood. He leaned forward, pointing at Zara Mitchell as though she were an intruder, not a customer. "You've wasted enough of our time," he snapped. "Security. Either escort her out or I'll call the police myself." Officer Miguel Torres didn't move. His hand rested on his belt, but not on his radio. The silence in his refusal spoke volumes. Zara breathed deeply, her pulse steady. She had given him chance after chance to correct himself, but he had chosen arrogance, insult, and humiliation. The time for quiet patience was over. Slowly, deliberately, she placed her briefcase on the counter. The soft thud against the marble echoed like a gavel striking wood. The lobby hushed. Aisha's phone trembled slightly in her hands as she tightened her grip, realizing something monumental was about to happen. Zara unlatched the case. Her movements were measured, almost ceremonial. She drew out a folder bound in deep blue leather, embossed with silver lettering. She laid it open on the counter. "This," she said, her voice calm, "is the board resolution from Washington Capital Group." Brad blinked, irritation crossing his face. "What's that supposed to mean?" Zara turned a page, revealing a document stamped with federal insignia. She slid it toward him. "It means that, as of 6 weeks ago, Washington Capital Group acquired controlling interest in Heritage First Bank, 67% of voting shares, to be exact." The room went still. No one moved. Brad glanced at the paper, then laughed nervously. "This is ridiculous. Anyone can print up official-looking documents. Doesn't make them real." Linda Harris leaned in, eyes skimming the header. Her hands trembled as she recognized the seal, the signatures. "Brad," she whispered, her voice tight. This looks real," Zara continued, her tone unwavering. "It is real. The Federal Reserve approved the transaction. Here's the certificate of approval." She slid another page forward, this one bearing the unmistakable watermark of the U.S. Treasury. Gas rippled through the lobby. The man in the gray suit muttered, "Oh my God." Aisha's live-stream comments erupted. "What she owns the bank play? This at every diversity seminar in America. He's done. Her view count soared past 10,000. Brad's smirk faltered. His hand hovered over the documents but didn't touch them, as though the paper might burn him. This doesn't mean—" "It means," Zara interrupted, her voice firm but even, "that I am the majority shareholder and effective chair of the board, which means you, Mr. Moore, work for me." The declaration detonated in the lobby. People gasped. Some clapped. Others simply gaped. "Mrs." Caldwell dropped her handbag with a thud. Even Torres let out a low whistle, his eyes wide. Brad stumbled back, color draining from his face. That's impossible," his Zara asked softly. She pulled another sheet from the folder, a press release from Washington Capital Group, dated and notarized, announcing the acquisition. She laid it flat on the counter, every word undeniable. Linda's knees wobbled. She steadied herself against the desk, her face pale. "Brad, she's telling the truth." The entire room had transformed. No longer was Zara the woman under suspicion. She was the woman holding the highest authority in the building. The power dynamic had flipped, and everyone felt it in their bones. Brad tried one last bluff, his voice trembling. "Even if this is true, you can't just walk in here demanding cash. There are still procedures." Zara closed the folder slowly, almost gently, as though she were laying a lid on a coffin. She looked Brad in the eye. "Procedures are meant to protect customers, not degrade them. You didn't follow procedure. You followed prejudice. The lobby burst into murmurs, people nodding, whispering, recording. A woman near the window wiped tears from her eyes. She's right. She's so right, Isha whispered into her phone, voice breaking with awe. Y'all, I can't believe what I'm witnessing. She's not just a customer. She owns the bank. The bank. Brad's hands shook. He reached for his sanitizer pump again, squeezing it twice, smearing gel across his palms like a nervous ritual. This doesn't change the fact that I had to protect the institution. No, Zara said, her voice like steel. You weren't protecting the institution. You were protecting your bias. The gray-suited man clapped once, then again. Soon others joined him, the sound swelling until it filled the lobby with a rhythm of vindication. Brad's face crumpled. His authority had dissolved, exposed under the bright light of truth. Zara gathered her folder and slid it back into the briefcase. She straightened her shoulders, the weight of years lifting from them. Her gaze swept the lobby, meeting eyes, acknowledging witnesses. This is not about humiliation, she said, loud enough for all to hear. It's about dignity. And dignity will always have the final word. The applause swelled again, louder this time, and Brad stood frozen, trapped in the center of a storm he had summoned but could not control. Aisha's phone buzzed as comments flooded faster than she could read. History just happened. Play this in every classroom. She's a legend, Linda whispered to Brad. You need to step down, right now, before this gets worse. But it was already too late. The first twist had landed, and the bank would never be the same. The applause slowly ebbed, leaving a charged silence hanging over the marble lobby. Every person in the room leaned forward, as if waiting for Zara Mitchell's next move. She did not rush. She let the silence stretch, knowing that power often lived in the pauses. Zara set her briefcase back on the counter and unlatched it once more. This time, the sound of the metallic click was sharper, more deliberate. She reached inside and withdrew a binder thicker than a phone book, its edges marked with color-coded tabs. When she laid it flat, the weight of it reverberated through the marble like the drop of a stone into still water. Mr. Moore, she said softly, you wanted to talk about procedures? Let's talk about data. Let's talk about the law. Bradley Moore swallowed hard. He glanced around the room, desperate for support, but all he saw were eyes turned against him. Linda Harris shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the gravity of what was coming. Zara flipped open the binder, her hands steady. This is an independent audit conducted by Marlowe Consulting, completed last month. It analyzes performance and customer treatment at every Heritage First branch. Page 36, Downtown Branch, your branch. She turned the binder toward the crowd so they could see. A line graph stretched across the page, a deep dive into customer satisfaction. This location ranks last in the entire system. Zara continued, dead last in customer retention, complaint resolution, and minority client engagement. Under your tenure, Mr. Moore, deposits here have dropped by nearly 19%. Every other branch has grown. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. The man in the gray suit muttered, that explains why my neighbors all pulled out their accounts. Brad tried to speak, but his voice cracked. Those numbers don't prove. They prove everything. Zara interrupted gently but firmly. She turned another page, this one filled with highlighted statistics. Formal discrimination complaints filed against this branch in the past 18 months, 7. The system average is 1 per year. Informal complaints logged through customer service, 42. Customer exits citing disrespect, 63. She let the numbers hang in the air. They spoke louder than her tone ever could. Aisha whispered into her phone, "She's reading the receipts. Y'all. Actual receipts. This isn't just her word. This is documented." Her live stream comments flooded again. "Numbers don't lie. This is systemic." He's finished. Zara turned another tab. "But let's not stop at customer data. Let's talk about compliance." Here she tapped the page is the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency's report. "For over a year, your branch has been under observation for loan approval disparities. White applicants with mid-range credit scores were approved 72% of the time. Black applicants with identical scores 41%. Hispanic applicants 38%. The air grew heavy, almost suffocating. Even Mrs. Caldwell, who had muttered about the neighborhood earlier, lowered her gaze. The weight of math was undeniable. Federal Regulation 12. SOAR 25.12 requires equal treatment of applicants regardless of race or ethnicity, Zara said. Her tone remained calm, but each word landed like a hammer. "Today, your actions have provided yet another piece of evidence for an ongoing investigation. And now, you've done it on camera." Every head turned toward Aisha, whose phone screen glowed with thousands of live viewers. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "We just hit 25,000. This is spreading everywhere." Brad's face sagged as though the floor had dropped from under him. His sanitized hands clutched the counter. "Mrs. Mitchell, you accused me of fraud, of being uneducated, of belonging at a pawn shop. You tried to have me escorted out of my own bank, and you justified all of it as procedure," Zara said. "But your own procedures," she tapped the binder again, "say otherwise." Linda finally spoke, her voice shaking. "Brad, I think we need to acknowledge what's happening here. This isn't just a misunderstanding. The numbers are clear." Brad snapped his head toward her, betrayal in his eyes. "Don't you dare turn on me, Linda." But she didn't retreat. She looked back at Zara. "Mrs. Mitchell, I admit I didn't intervene. I should have. I let him lead, and I stayed quiet. That was my failure." The crowd stirred. Some nodded. Some murmured approval. For the first time, Linda Harris seemed to be shedding her complicity. Zara regarded her calmly. "Acknowledgement is the first step. Action is the next." She turned back to Brad. "As of this moment, Mr. Moore, your position as branch manager is terminated, effective immediately. Termination with cause documented under discriminatory practices in violation of both federal banking regulation and company policy. You will forfeit your severance." The words landed with clinical precision. No drama, no raised voice, just the quiet finality of a gavel strike. Brad's lips trembled. "You can't, I can," Zara replied. "And I have." The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound came from Aisha's phone, where hearts and comments raced across the screen. Justice served Liv. She fired him on the spot. Officer Torres exhaled slowly, shoulders dropping. Relief washed across his face. He had seen countless conflicts end in chaos. This one had ended with clarity. Linda covered her mouth, eyes glistening. Kendra Lewis, the young teller, blinked rapidly, as though she might cry. The crowd, still stunned, waited for what would happen next. Zara gathered the binder and slid it back into her case. She stood straighter, her presence filling the space without effort. "Ladies and gentlemen, what happened here today was not unique. It has happened in banks, in restaurants, in airports, in offices, to people whose only crime was not fitting someone else's idea of respectability." Her gaze swept the room, resting briefly on each face. before lingering on Aisha's camera. But today, it happened under the watch of thousands. And truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. The applause rose again, this time with conviction. People clapped, cheered, even whistled. Mrs. Caldwell clapped too. Tentative at first, then firmer, the man in the gray suit shouted, "That's how you hold power accountable." Brad stumbled backward, his career dissolving before him. His mouth opened, but no words came. He turned, shoulders slumped, and shuffled toward the glass doors. They hissed open, and he disappeared into the daylight. No one followed him. No one stopped him. He was gone. Irrelevant. A cautionary tale already forming. Zara remained still for a moment, breathing evenly, letting the applause crest and settle. Then she turned to Linda. "Miss Harris, you'll meet me in my office Monday morning at 8. We will discuss your role and what comes next. Whether you stay depends entirely on what you're willing to learn." Linda nodded quickly, her voice barely audible. "Yes, Mrs. Mitchell. I'll be there." Zara shifted her gaze to Kendra. "Ms. Lewis, beginning Monday, you will serve as assistant branch manager. You've demonstrated courage, and courage deserves responsibility. Your salary will reflect the role." Kendra's eyes filled with tears. Her hand flew to her mouth. She whispered, "Thank you," though the sound was drowned by cheers. Aisha's phone buzzed violently as her stream hit 35,000 live viewers. She whispered, "They're calling her a hero. They're saying this is history." Zara offered a small smile, but her tone remained steady. "History is only useful if it becomes change, and change begins Monday morning." The lobby, now a courtroom transformed into a classroom, erupted once again in applause. The heavy glass doors of Heritage First Bank closed behind Bradley Moore with a soft click. The sound seemed to lift a weight from the air, as though the building itself exhaled. For a moment, silence reigned, a silence thick with disbelief and relief. Zara Mitchell remained standing at the center of the lobby, briefcase in hand, calm as ever. She didn't look triumphant. She looked steady, like someone who had long prepared for this moment and knew the work was only beginning. The customers, who had witnessed everything, lingered. Some clapped again. Others whispered to one another. A few approached Zara with hesitant gratitude, their voices unsteady. "Thank you," murmured Mrs. Caldwell, her pearl necklace trembling against her blouse. "I spoke out of fear earlier. I was wrong. You showed us what real leadership looks like." Zara met her eyes with kindness. "Acknowledging it is the first step, Mrs. Caldwell. We all have blind spots. What matters is what we do once we see them." "Mrs." Caldwell nodded, blinking rapidly. The man in the gray suit stepped forward. "Ma'am, I've been banking here for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like this. You've given me hope that things can change." "Things will change," Zara said, "but only if we hold each other accountable." Aisha was still filming, her hands shaking with adrenaline. She whispered to the camera, "She's still so calm. Y'all, she just changed the entire energy in here." Her comments flooded. "She's a queen. This is how justice looks. I'm moving my account to her bank tomorrow." Linda Harris cleared her throat, stepping closer to Zara. Her voice was hushed, stripped of its earlier authority. "Mrs. Mitchell, what happens now?" To the staff. To this branch, Zara studied her for a long moment. Linda fidgeted under the gaze. "What happens," Zara said, "is transformation. This branch has been a place where prejudice lived unchecked. That ends today." She turned to face the staff still at their stations. Kendra Lewis stood tall, her hands folded tightly in front of her, still processing the shock of her promotion. Two other tellers peeked nervously from behind their desks, unsure whether to step forward. Beginning Monday, Zara continued, this branch will pilot Washington Capital's Dignity First service model. Every interaction will be guided by three principles: respect, fairness, and accountability. No more shortcuts, no more excuses. The crowd murmured in approval. One man whispered, "Finally." Officer Torres, who had remained quietly at his post, approached Zara. His eyes held a mixture of respect and exhaustion. "Ma'am, I've been doing security work for 20 years. I've seen plenty of people thrown out of banks, airports, stores for no reason other than bias. I want to thank you for what you did today. You didn't just stop him. You set a precedent." Zara placed a hand on his shoulder. "And you showed restraint when it mattered. That takes strength. You'll receive a commendation in my report." Torres nodded, visibly relieved. For him, today could have ended in a headline for all the wrong reasons. Zara glanced at Aisha, who was still live, her face glowing with awe. "Young lady, what's your name, Aisha Brown?" she stammered, lowering her phone just slightly. "Keep recording." "Aisha," Zara said, "the world should see what happens next too. Not just the firing, but the rebuilding." Aisha swallowed hard and lifted the phone again, whispering to her viewers, "She knows we're watching. She's not hiding a thing." Zara turned to Linda. "Gather the staff, please, right here, in the lobby." Linda obeyed quickly, her authority now borrowed from Zara. The tellers gathered in a half circle, their eyes wide, their postures uncertain. "This is not about shaming you," Zara told them gently. "It's about honesty. For too long, people like me have been made to feel like intruders in spaces we already own. You've seen it. Some of you have lived it. And some of you, perhaps, have looked away. That ends now." Her voice didn't rise, but every syllable carried weight. The staff nodded, some with tears in their eyes. Kendra found her courage. "Mrs. Mitchell, I've wanted to speak up so many times, but I thought I'd lose my job. Today, you showed me that silence is the greater cost. I won't stay quiet again." Zara's eyes softened. "That's why you'll help lead this branch. Courage must be rewarded, or it dies." A murmur of support rippled through the lobby. Even customers who had intended to leave for the weekend now stood straighter, invested in the transformation unfolding before them. "On Monday," Zara said, "you'll all receive new training. You'll learn not only compliance, but compassion. You'll be measured not just by transactions, but by how well you honor dignity. Customer surveys will go directly to Washington Capital's quality team. There will be no shadows for discrimination to hide in." Linda swallowed hard. "And if we fail, then you leave," Zara said simply. "This branch will no longer be a safe haven for bias." The bluntness sent another wave through the crowd. A few customers clapped again. Someone called out. About time, Zara closed her briefcase, signaling the end of the impromptu tribunal. She glanced once more at the clock above the marble wall. Now 3:20 p. Meh. The bank should have closed 20 minutes ago. Yet no one had left. "Go home," Zara told the customers gently. "Rest, and come back on Monday. You'll see a new Heritage First." People filed out slowly, many stopping to shake her hand or thank her. A few exchanged glances with each other, as if sharing a secret vow they would tell this story to everyone they knew. As the lobby thinned, Zara finally exhaled, her shoulders relaxing. The day had tested her patience, her composure, and her resolve. But she had known moments like this would come. She had built her entire career preparing for them. Linda lingered at the edge of the lobby, wringing her hands. She seemed smaller now, as if stripped of her protective armor. Zara approached her, lowering her voice. "You froze today," Zara said, not unkindly. "You followed instead of leading. If you want to stay, you'll need to find your spine." Linda's eyes filled with tears. "I understand. I'll do better." Zara nodded once, then turned to leave. Kendra rushed forward. "Mrs. Mitchell, may I walk you out?" Zara smiled. "Of course." As they stepped into the fading sunlight, the city hummed around them. People hurried along the sidewalks, unaware that a revolution had just begun inside the bank on the corner of Peachtree and 10th. Zara paused at the curb, looking back at the building's gleaming facade. "This place will no longer humiliate people for daring to belong," she said quietly. Kendra nodded, her voice trembling with pride. "Not while you're here." By Friday evening, word of the confrontation at Heritage First Bank had already spilled far beyond the marble lobby. What began as a shaky live stream on Aisha Brown's phone was replayed, clipped, and dissected across social media. Within hours, hashtags trended, "Well, she owns the bank," "Banking while black," "Zara Mitchell." Cable news anchors leaned over their desks, replaying the moment Zara calmly declared, "You work for me." Commentators split screens with footage of Bradley Moore fumbling and Zara standing firm. Local news vans parked outside the Peachtree branch, their satellite dishes aimed at the darkening sky. Zara sat quietly in her townhome that night, the city lights flickering through tall windows. She didn't watch the coverage. She preferred silence after the storm, sipping her chamomile tea with steady hands. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, messages from board members, texts from colleagues, voicemails from journalists. She ignored most, except for one call from her mentor, a retired banker named Samuel Reed. "You handled yourself with grace," Samuel said. His gravelly voice carried both pride and caution. "But brace yourself. You shook a system that doesn't like being rattled. They'll try to turn this into a spectacle. Some will call you a hero. Others will say you embarrassed the institution." Zara exhaled softly. The institution embarrassed itself. "Samuel, all I did was shine a light." Samuel chuckled low. "And sometimes that's enough to burn people's eyes." By Saturday morning, the ripple had become a wave. Community leaders gathered outside the bank, some holding signs, "Dignity in banking," and "We belong here." Customers lined up to close their accounts at other branches and move them to Heritage First. Some said it was protest. Others called it loyalty to Zara. Reporters jostled for sound bites. Aisha, overwhelmed by attention, found herself interviewed on live television. She described the moment with breathless sincerity. "I just wanted to show what was happening. But when she opened that folder and said she owned the bank, I swear, I felt history shift under my feet." The interviewer leaned in. "And what do you think this moment means?" Aisha hesitated, then found her voice. "It means dignity isn't negotiable anymore. Not here, not anywhere." Her words ricocheted across newsrooms and social platforms. The clip went viral, pulling her into the story as a symbol of youth, witnessing justice in real time. Meanwhile, Bradley Moore had vanished from public view. His resignation letter leaked online, its defensive tone only fueling outrage. He wrote of miscommunication and misperceptions, never once admitting bias. Online commenters tore his words apart. Memes appeared overnight. Brad clutching hand sanitizer with captions like "Cleans hands, not conscience." inside her home office. Zara reviewed emails from Washington Capital Group's board. Some congratulated her courage. Others fretted about brand exposure. A few warned that regulators might increase scrutiny. She drafted careful replies, reiterating her vision transformation, not damage control. But Zara also felt the fatigue creeping in. She leaned back in her leather chair, closing her eyes. For years she had fought battles in conference rooms, over balance sheets and acquisition terms. But this was raw, public, emotional. She thought of the faces in the bank, Kendra's quiet bravery, Linda's shaken apology, Mrs. Caldwell's softened regret. Those moments carried more weight than any stock price. That evening, she joined a community forum at the Ebenezer Baptist Church downtown. The sanctuary buzzed with voices, filled with neighbors, clergy, activists, and local officials. The pastor welcomed Zara warmly, inviting her to speak. She stood at the pulpit, gazing out at the crowd. Stained glass cast soft colors across the pews. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. What happened on Friday was not an isolated moment. She began. It was a reflection of something much larger, something many of you have lived. Being doubted, being dismissed, being treated as though your presence is an inconvenience, your dignity optional. I want you to know that ends at Heritage First, and I hope it ends in more places too. Applause filled the sanctuary. Some stood, clapping. Others wept quietly. Afterward, an elderly man approached her, leaning on his cane. "Ma'am, I've been turned away from 3 different banks in my life. Each time they said it was my paperwork, my credit, my address. But I knew what it really was. Friday, when I saw you stand tall, I felt like you were standing for me too." Zara clasped his hand gently. "Then that's worth every battle." By Sunday, pressure mounted from beyond Atlanta. Editorials ran in national newspapers. One headline read, "Dignity Deposited, What a Black CEO Taught Banking About Justice." Another countered, "When Leadership Goes Public." Did Zara Mitchell cross a line? Corporate watchdogs announced inquiries into Heritage First compliance data. Civil rights organizations praised Zara, demanding industry-wide reforms. Politicians weighed in, some praising her courage, others hedging with calls for due process. Through it all, Zara remained composed. She spent the day reviewing plans for Monday's relaunch of the Peachtree branch. She asked her assistant to schedule meetings with staff, regulators, and community leaders. She also reached out to Kendra personally, encouraging her to prepare for her new role. Sunday evening, as dust settled over Atlanta, Zara took a walk through Piedmont Park. The air smelled of cut grass and late summer heat. She watched children chase each other near the fountain, parents laughing nearby. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe in the ordinary. But even there, whispers followed. A jogger slowed, recognizing her. "You're the woman from the video." "Right, thank you. You gave us all courage." Zara smiled gently. "Keep it alive. Courage dies if we don't share it." The jogger nodded and ran on. That night, Zara journaled by lamplight. Her handwriting, steady and deliberate, filled the pages. Friday was not victory. It was unveiling. Now comes the rebuilding. The system bends only when enough hands push. Tomorrow, we push harder. Across town, Aisha scrolled through messages from strangers who had seen her live stream. Some offered praise. Others shared their own painful experiences with banks. She whispered to herself, "I was just holding up my phone." But maybe that was enough. Kendra spent the weekend with her parents, explaining the promotion. Her father, a retired postal worker, wept quietly at the kitchen table. Baby, I carried mail through this city for 30 years. Rain, heat, dogs, but nothing hurt worse than the way people looked at me like I didn't belong. You're changing that." And Linda Harris sat alone in her apartment, replaying the scene in her mind. Every insult Brad hurled, every moment she stayed silent. Shame sat heavy on her chest. She poured herself a glass of water and whispered, "Monday, I have to be different, or I don't deserve to stay." The weekend ended not with calm, but with a gathering storm. By Monday morning, when Zara would walk back into the branch, she knew the world would be watching customers, regulators, investors, activists, skeptics. Every step would matter. She closed her journal, set down her pen, and whispered into the quiet of her home, "Let the rebuilding begin." Monday morning arrived with a sharp, cloudless sky over Atlanta. The Peachtree branch of Heritage First Bank looked ordinary from the outside polished windows. Brass handles, morning light glinting off its nameplate. But inside, it no longer felt like the same building. The lobby hummed with anticipation. Reporters lingered across the street, cameras poised, customers lined up earlier than usual, some out of curiosity, others out of solidarity. At precisely 8 o'clock, Zara Mitchell stepped through the doors. She wore a navy suit, crisp and understated, her leather briefcase tucked under one arm. The staff stood in a line near the counter, waiting nervously. Kendra Lewis stood at the front, eyes bright with equal parts nerves and pride. Linda Harris stood just behind her, hands clasped tightly, as if holding herself together. Zara paused, scanning the lobby. Her presence filled the space, quiet but commanding. She set her briefcase down on the counter and smiled faintly. "Good morning, everyone. Let's begin." She gathered the staff into a circle near the center of the lobby. The customers who had arrived early hushed, listening as if they, too, were part of the meeting. "This is day one," Zara said, her voice steady. "Day one of a new Heritage First. What happened here Friday was painful, but it was also a gift. It forced us to look at the truth. And the truth is, we cannot serve our community until we serve dignity first." She looked around at each face. Kendra straightened her back. Linda lowered her gaze. Two tellers exchanged uneasy glances. "From today," Zara continued, "every interaction with a customer must honor 3 values: respect, fairness, and accountability. These are not slogans. They will be measured. Customers will be invited to rate their experience in real time, and those ratings will be monitored by Washington Capital's oversight team." She handed out slim folders to each employee. Inside are the Dignity First protocols. They outline expectations, but also protections for customers and for you. If you see bias, you have the authority to stop it. You will not be punished for doing the right thing. Linda raised her hand hesitantly. "Mrs. Mitchell, what if a customer acts out of prejudice against us? What if they're disrespectful?" Zara nodded. "A fair question. Respect goes both ways. If a customer crosses the line, you'll have the support to set boundaries. But we will not meet their prejudice with ours. We will respond with clarity and consistency." The staff nodded slowly, absorbing her words. Just then, a customer stepped forward, a middle-aged black woman with 2 young children. She cleared her throat. "Mrs. Mitchell, I came today to open an account. I wanted my kids to see this moment, to see a bank that actually welcomes us." The lobby fell silent. Zara smiled warmly. "We're honored to have you here. Kendra, will you assist this family personally?" Kendra's eyes lit up. "Yes, ma'am." She guided the woman and her children to her desk. The children stared wide-eyed at Zara as though she were a superhero. Zara turned back to the group. This is what change looks like. Not speeches, not headlines, but choices, moment by moment. A murmur of agreement spread through the lobby. Even the customers who had come only to watch now stood taller, as though they belonged to something larger than a transaction. At 9 o'clock sharp, Zara convened a private staff session in the upstairs conference room. The blinds were half drawn, letting in stripes of sunlight across the table. She gestured for Linda to sit beside her. A deliberate choice. "Linda," Zara began, "Friday revealed a lot. You froze, but you also admitted your failure. That matters. Now I need to know, are you willing to rebuild trust? Not just with me, but with the entire community." Linda's voice cracked. "Yes, Mrs. Mitchell. I've replayed that moment 100 times. I hated what I saw in myself. If you let me stay, I promise you'll see someone different." Zara studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Redemption isn't a promise. It's a process. You'll shadow Kendra for the next month. Learn from her courage. Then we'll revisit your position." Linda blinked back tears. "Thank you. I won't waste this chance." Later that morning, Zara invited Officer Miguel Torres into the conference room. He looked surprised to be called upstairs. "Mr. Torres," Zara said, "on Friday, you chose restraint. You did not escalate. That decision changed the outcome. I want you to know it's been noted. Effective today, you'll also serve as our liaison for community safety programs. You'll work with local schools to teach de-escalation and trust building." Torres' eyes widened. I'd be honored." By midday, the branch buzzed with new energy. Customers filled the lobby, not just to withdraw or deposit, but to witness the change. Some carried flowers, setting them on the counter as a quiet thank you. Others simply shook Zara's hand, their eyes glistening. Reporters pressed for interviews, but Zara declined politely. "Watch our work. That will be my answer." As the day stretched on, Kendra handled account openings with a newfound confidence. Linda shadowed her closely, jotting notes, occasionally wincing as Kendra demonstrated what should have been obvious all along: patience, clarity, respect. Aisha Brown slipped in during her lunch break, phone in hand. She whispered, "My viewers wanted to see what it looks like now." Zara gestured for her to record freely. Aisha filmed Kendra guiding a customer through paperwork, Torres greeting children with a smile, and Linda quietly observing. The comments poured in again. "This is healing, proof that change is possible." She didn't just fire him, she rebuilt the house. By closing time, the staff gathered once more in the lobby. They looked tired, but different, lighter, hopeful. "You did well today," Zara told them, "but this is only the beginning. Every day will test us. Every day will ask us whether we mean what we say. We will stumble sometimes, but we will not go back." The staff nodded in unison as Zara stepped outside into the golden evening light. A small crowd had gathered. They clapped, not with frenzy, but with gratitude. She raised her hand in acknowledgement, her smile quiet but resolute. Inside, the peach tree branch glowed with a new kind of energy. It wasn't just a bank anymore, it was a promise. By Tuesday morning, the story had leapt from Atlanta to Wall Street. Financial reporters spoke less about stock tickers and more about the Zara effect. Heritage First Bank's name dominated headlines, not for losses or gains, but for dignity, reform, and the ousting of one arrogant manager. On CNBC, a host leaned toward the camera. What happened at a single branch in Atlanta may mark the start of an industry-wide reckoning. When a black CEO stands in her own bank and says, "You work for me," it forces institutions everywhere to confront questions of bias and accountability. Analysts debated whether Zara Mitchell's reforms would hold or fizzle. Some praised her direct leadership. Others warned of costs and resistance. But no one dismissed her. Her presence loomed large, not only as a CEO but as a symbol. By midweek, civil rights groups issued formal letters to the Federal Reserve, demanding mandatory dignity protocols across all major banks. Editorials appeared in the New York Times and the Washington Post, calling Zara's actions a template for institutional courage. Meanwhile, grassroots organizers scheduled protests at banks in Chicago, Dallas, and Los Angeles, carrying signs that read, "Where's your Zara?" inside Washington Capital Group's headquarters. The boardroom buzzed. Executives argued over risk and optics. Some feared backlash from conservative investors. Others worried about lawsuits from dismissed managers like Bradley Moore. Zara sat at the head of the table, calm as ever, her hands folded neatly. "We are not in the business of protecting prejudice," she said. Her voice carried across the glossy mahogany. "We are in the business of trust, and trust is worth more than any single account." A younger board member, Jamal Davis, leaned forward eagerly. "The public is with us. Zara, this could redefine our brand." An older director frowned. "Redefine or destabilize both?" Zara replied, "But only one will last." The room fell quiet. Even the skeptics couldn't deny the truth her vision carried momentum. And the world was watching. Outside corporate towers, the ripple deepened. At Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Zara had spoken days earlier, volunteers began organizing financial literacy workshops. "If she can own a bank," one youth leader said, "we can learn to own our future." At Atlanta's community college, Aisha Brown gave her first classroom talk. Invited by a professor, she replayed her shaky live stream for students studying media ethics. "I didn't think anyone would care," she admitted, "but now I know sometimes holding up a phone can hold up the truth." The room erupted in applause. Meanwhile, Kendra Lewis adjusted to her new role. She drafted training guides late into the night, weaving her own values into the Dignity First model. Her parents visited the branch on Wednesday, beaming as she led them through the lobby. "You see that desk?" she whispered. "That's mine now." Her father's eyes glistened with pride. Linda Harris carried her own burden. Each morning, she arrived early, shadowing Kendra, listening more than speaking. Customers eyed her with suspicion. Some recognized her from the video. One afternoon, an elderly black woman approached her directly. "You stood there Friday and said nothing." Linda's throat tightened. "You're right, and I regret it deeply. I'm trying to change." The woman studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then prove it. Don't just say it." Linda carried those words like a stone in her pocket. Heavy and grounding, necessary. By Thursday, pressure mounted on other banks. Rival CEOs fielded questions on live television. "What are you doing to ensure dignity at your branches?" reporters asked. Some dodged. Others announced hasty new training programs. None matched the clarity of Zara's model. That evening, Zara attended a town hall at Atlanta City Hall. The chamber overflowed residents, activists, business leaders. Even reporters pressed against the walls. The mayor introduced her with rare warmth. "She has not only managed money, she has managed to remind us what leadership looks like." When Zara stepped to the podium, the room hushed. Cameras clicked, pens hovered. "I am not here to polish Heritage First's image," she began. "I am here to tell you that banking, at its core, is a promise. a promise to protect people's hard-earned dignity as much as their dollars. That promise has been broken too many times. We are mending it, not with words, but with action. She outlined the new Dignity First protocols, the real-time survey system, the zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. She didn't shy away from calling it what it was: systemic change, not window dressing. Applause thundered, rolling through the chamber like a tide. Reporters scribbled furiously. Hashtags lit up again. At home that night, Zara sat at her kitchen table, tired but resolute. Samuel Reed called again, his voice softer now. "They're calling you the conscience of banking," he said. Zara smiled faintly. "Consciences are inconvenient, but necessary." Samuel chuckled. "Don't let them wear you down." "I won't," she said. But when she hung up, she let the quiet settle over her. The fight ahead would be longer, harder. She knew that, but for the first time in years, she also felt the wind at her back. The week closed with an op-ed in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Its headline read, "She didn't just fire him. She fired an era." The words struck Zara when she read them Saturday morning. She folded the paper gently and placed it on her bookshelf. She didn't believe in eras ending overnight, but maybe, just maybe, one had begun. The Monday after the town hall, the branch lobby felt different. Not louder, not busier, but charged like air just after a summer storm. Customers greeted tellers with warmth. Staff smiled more easily. And the tension that once simmered beneath every interaction seemed to have lifted. Yet beneath the new calm, deeper currents moved in the lives of those most touched by Friday's confrontation. For Zara Mitchell, the weight of leadership pressed heavily in the quiet moments. At night, when the city lights flickered through her window, she replayed the scene in her mind, the sneer on Bradley Moore's face, the hush of the crowd, the trembling in Kendra's hands before she found her voice. She remembered too vividly the ache in her chest, the familiar sting of being underestimated, doubted, profiled. It was not the first time, and she knew it would not be the last. But now, there was something different. She no longer carried it alone. The story belonged to the public, to communities far beyond Atlanta, and that truth frightened her as much as it emboldened her. One evening, she sat with her old leather journal, a ritual she'd kept since graduate school. Her handwriting sloped across the page. Am I doing this for me or for them? Can I hold both? She paused, tapping the pen against her lip. Then she wrote another line. Leadership is lonely, but it cannot be selfish. At the branch, Linda Harris struggled with silence of another kind. The shame of her inaction gnawed at her daily. She smiled politely to customers, but every thank you sounded like an accusation in her ears. She thought about her own daughter, a college freshman, and wondered what lessons she'd taught by staying quiet that Friday afternoon. One night she confessed to her husband. I froze, she whispered, her voice cracking. I saw what Bradley was doing, and I froze. He reached for her hand. You can't undo it, Linda. But you can decide who you are tomorrow. The next morning, Linda arrived at the branch earlier than anyone else. She wrote a note on a yellow pad and pinned it to the staff bulletin board. Silence is not neutral. If you see discrimination, speak. If you fear speaking, come to me. Together, we'll find courage. She signed it simply, Linda. When Kendra Lewis saw the note, her chest tightened. She knew it must have taken courage for Linda to write those words. Later that day, she found Linda in the break room. I read your note, Kendra said softly. Linda turned, her eyes wary. Do you believe it? Kendra hesitated, then nodded. I believe you're trying, and that matters. The two women stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of past wounds hovering, but not crushing. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. Meanwhile, Aisha Brown found herself swept into a world she hadn't expected. Her livestream had passed 100,000 views, and messages poured in strangers thanking her for documenting the truth. Small business owners asking if she could teach them how to use social media to tell their stories. At first, she laughed it off. She was just a student with a phone. But then, one message from a single mother in Detroit stuck with her. I saw your video and cried. I've been treated like that so many times. You made me feel seen. Aisha stared at the message for a long time. Maybe her role wasn't just to capture injustice, it was to amplify dignity. By Friday, she had drafted a plan for a small consulting venture. She called it Bright Lens Media, a company dedicated to documenting stories of resilience. When she told Zara about it over coffee, Zara's smile was gentle but fierce. Don't underestimate yourself, Aisha. The world changes because ordinary people decide their voices matter. Kendra's journey took its own turns. With her promotion, she suddenly found herself managing colleagues who had once dismissed her. Some bristled under her new authority, especially older staff who resented reporting to a young black woman. The resistance stung. One afternoon, she overheard two tellers muttering, she only got that job because of the video. Kendra clenched her jaw. For a moment, she wanted to confront them with sharp words, but instead, she returned to her desk, heart pounding. Later that evening, she stayed late, drafting new customer service training modules. She poured her frustration into the work, determined to prove her merit not with arguments but with results. At home, she called her mother. It feels like no matter what I do, someone will think I don't deserve it. Her mother's voice was steady on the line. Baby, that's the story of us. But listen to me. You don't need to convince everyone. You just need to build something so strong they can't ignore it. Kendra wiped her eyes and whispered, I'll try. By Saturday, her training manual was complete 40 pages of clear, empathetic practices. She slipped it into a binder with a handwritten note. For Zara, excellence is the best rebuttal. For Zara, personal life remained elusive. Friends invited her to dinners, but she often declined, retreating into the solitude of her apartment. One evening, her mentor Samuel Reed stopped by unannounced with takeout. He found her surrounded by files and notes, exhaustion written in her posture. Zara, you can't carry this pace forever, he said gently. She sighed. If I slow down, I worry the momentum will die. Samuel opened the takeout containers, the smell of fried chicken filling the room. Movements don't die because leaders rest. They die because leaders forget they're human. Eat. They ate in silence for a while before Zara spoke again. Do you ever wonder if it's enough? One branch, one bank, it feels so small compared to the mountain of bias out there. Samuel leaned back. Change never feels big when you're in it. But trust me, someone out there is watching you and believing for the first time that they can climb too. That's not small. Zara let the words settle. Maybe the fight wasn't about erasing every injustice. It was about sparking enough fires that the darkness couldn't win. Sunday morning, the branch was closed, but a group of community members gathered outside. They chalked words on the sidewalk: respect, dignity, justice. Children drew hearts and dollar signs side by side, giggling as parents watched with misty eyes. Linda walked by on her way to church, stopping to watch. One little boy looked up at her and said, "This is our bank now." Linda smiled, her heart tight. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, it is." By the end of that week, the aftershocks were clear. Zara had become more than a CEO. Linda had stepped onto the hard road of redemption. Kendra had chosen resilience over resentment. And Aisha had found her purpose in amplifying voices. Their lives, intertwined by one Friday afternoon, now rippled outward, touching strangers, reshaping communities, redefining what dignity could mean in places once ruled by prejudice. Spring arrived in Atlanta with dogwoods blooming and warm breezes drifting through downtown streets. By then, the Heritage First Bank incident was no longer just a headline. It had become a parable, told in classrooms, boardrooms, and kitchen tables alike. People called it the day dignity walked into a bank. For Zara Mitchell, life had shifted. She was still CEO, still juggling endless meetings. But something deeper had taken root. She no longer felt like an outsider in the industry. She had become a reference point. Her speeches were quoted, her reforms replicated, and yet she carried herself with the same steady calm she had shown that Friday afternoon. On a crisp April morning, she walked into the downtown branch, not as an executive with files, but as a customer. The lobby buzzed with quiet energy. A young mother deposited a check while her toddler tugged at her sleeve. An elderly man sat with a banker, sipping complimentary coffee. The air felt normal, respectful. Kendra Lewis spotted her and hurried over, beaming. "Mrs. Mitchell, good morning. Everything's running smoothly. Customer satisfaction is up another 12 points. Zara smiled. "That's your work. Kendra, don't forget to own it." Kendra blushed, but her shoulders straightened. She no longer shrank under whispers or doubts. She had built her own authority. One training, one conversation, one hard day at a time. Nearby. Linda Harris handed a folder to a teller and then walked toward Zara, nervous but composed. "May I speak with you?" "Of course," Zara said, stepping aside with her. Linda drew a breath. "I've been meeting with staff weekly, talking about what silence costs. I know I'll never erase that day, but I'm trying to make sure no one here ever feels as powerless as I did." Zara studied her for a moment, then nodded. "That's how you change a legacy. Linda, not by pretending the past never happened, but by refusing to repeat it." Tears glimmered in Linda's eyes, but she smiled. "Thank you for giving me a chance to do better." Outside the branch, Aisha Brown stood filming a short video for her new company, Bright Lens Media. She interviewed a small business owner who had just opened an account under the new minority-friendly loan program. Her lens caught laughter, gratitude, and the sparkle of possibility. Aisha's business was growing faster than she'd dreamed, but she kept her purpose simple: show dignity in action. That evening, Zara returned to her apartment and found a letter waiting in her mailbox. It bore the seal of Harvard Business School. Inside, an invitation: deliver the keynote at the annual conference on ethical leadership. She held the letter in her hands, remembering her younger self, an intern dismissed in hallways, a junior analyst mistaken for an assistant. She smiled faintly. Life had come full circle. Weeks later, in a grand hall filled with polished wood and bright lights, Zara stood before 1,000 business students and faculty. She began not with charts or statistics, but with a story. "I once walked into a bank to withdraw my own money," she said, "and I was told to try the pawn shop next door." What happened in the 13 minutes that followed changed more than my afternoon. It changed how one institution, and maybe many, will treat people for years to come. The audience leaned forward, hanging on each word. She spoke not of vengeance, but of vision, not of rage, but of reform. Her voice carried the conviction that dignity was not charity. It was strategy, survival, and strength. She ended with quiet force. Discrimination isn't only immoral, it's expensive, and dignity, my friends, pays the best dividends. Thunderous applause filled the hall. Students rose to their feet, some with tears in their eyes, others with fire in their hearts. Back in Atlanta, the branch continued to flourish. Customer deposits climbed, employee turnover plummeted, and minority loan approvals soared. More importantly, the culture shifted conversations that once sparked fear, now sparked action. People no longer asked, "What will happen if I speak up?" but "What will happen if I don't?" Bradley Moore, the disgraced former manager, had all but disappeared from the industry. Rumors swirled of failed job applications, of interviews cut short when his record surfaced. His name became shorthand for arrogance unchecked. HR departments across the country asked a simple question: do we have a Bradley here? Yet the story wasn't about his fall. It was about what rose in his absence. Heritage First had become a model for dignity, first banking, studied by regulators and replicated by competitors. Communities once ignored found doors opening. Customers once silenced found voices valued. One Sunday afternoon, Zara visited Ebenezer Baptist Church again. The same pew where she had sat in quiet prayer now buzzed with young volunteers preparing financial literacy workshops. She slipped into the back, unnoticed, and listened as a teenager explained compound interest to a group of children. His voice trembled but held steady. Zara smiled. The ripple was real. As she walked home, her phone buzzed with a text from Samuel Reed, proud of you. Remember to rest. She chuckled softly, sliding the phone back into her pocket. That night, she returned to her journal. Her pen moved slowly across the page. This isn't the end. It never will be. But maybe it's enough for today. She closed the book, exhaled, and let the silence of her apartment wrap around her like a gentle cloak. For the city, the bank, the people who witnessed and those who only heard, the lesson endured dignity denied is costly. Dignity defended is priceless. And for anyone who ever doubted, the memory of one calm woman in a navy suit standing tall in a marble lobby reminded them quiet power can shake empires. Zara Mitchell's story is more than a headline. It's a reminder that dignity is not optional. We all encounter moments where someone tries to shrink us, dismiss us, or make us feel small. In those moments, the temptation is to stay quiet, to avoid conflict, but silence allows disrespect to grow. Zara chose differently. She confronted prejudice not with rage, but with calm authority and truth. She didn't just reclaim her dignity. She transformed an entire system, creating space where others could walk in without fear. Her story teaches us that change begins in small choices, choosing to speak, to act, to believe that respect is non-negotiable. For older audiences especially, this lesson resonates. Our lived experiences matter. We've seen injustice. We've endured hardship. And we know silence is costly. Zara's example reminds us that it's never too late to insist on fairness, to demand accountability, and to leave behind institutions stronger than we found them. In everyday life, whether in a workplace, a store, or even within our families, we have the power to shape culture. We can teach by example. Dignity is the most valuable legacy we leave behind. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful journey. If Zara's story touched you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own strength, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories of dignity, justice, and courage to life.